Hello, everyone. Good morning, early good afternoon. I'm Genevieve Wood with the Daily Signal at the Heritage Foundation, and we appreciate you all coming to the May edition of Conversations with Conservatives. Many of you are regulars here, but as you know, this is an event that is normally chaired by three members, two of which are here right now. Congressman Huelskamp, Congressman Labrador, and Congressman Jordan will be here shortly. Congresswoman Cynthia Lummis is joining us today, and we have a number of other members who are running a bit late, but they are coming. So we're going to go ahead and get started. And I just wanted to remind everybody here, when I do open up the floor for questions, if you'll just please state your name and the organization or outlet that you're with so that everybody knows who we're talking to, that would be terrific. All right, great. We have another member coming in. All right, let's get started. I'm going to begin with one question on a topic that I know you all have been very engaged in, everyone here, and that's the topic of the Export-Import Bank. I read in Politico this morning that conservatives are increasingly emboldened that they have the votes, not necessarily to win a vote if it were to come to the floor, but to perhaps keep it off of the House floor. So let me ask you all, and I'll come to you first, Congressman Labrador, where do you think it truly stands, this whole debate?
Well, I thought the headline, I'm not sure that was exactly the message that we had. We were emboldened that we have the numbers in the Republican House, with the Republicans, but there's always a lot of things that could happen. There's a lot of tricks that could be used by the leadership. But the reality is that we have an issue where across the board, every Republican candidate for president is on board with us. Most conservative groups are with us. And all we have to do is do nothing. All we have to do is not put it on the floor, and we would be successful in stopping cronyism in Washington, D.C. You know, I tell my friends all the time that the Republican Party is the party of small government, the party of the people, but yet we're spending all this time, investing all of our time talking about how we can benefit the few at the expense of the many. And we should never be doing that as a Republican Party. So I think we can be successful by making sure that our leadership understands that the American people don't want to pick winners and losers in Washington, D.C. That's why we have a 15, 16, whatever the approval rating is. Every week it seems to change, but it's pretty low. And it is because they think that what happens to us is we come to Washington, D.C., we get elected, and once we get elected, we come here to just do special favors for special friends. And that should never happen in Washington, and it should specifically and especially never happen in the Republican Party. So I feel pretty good about our prospects, and I think we're going to continue to fight.
Is anybody here concerned that the Speaker, Mr. Boehner, is going to call a vote and team up with the Democrats on this one? Congressman Amash?
Thanks. I just arrived. I probably echo whatever Raul just said.
I wasn't quite that direct with him.
He does so at his own peril. I don't think the American people want our Speaker teaming up with the Democrats to push for corporate welfare. It's exactly the wrong thing for conservatives to be teaming up with Democrats for. So I expect that he won't. The American people are becoming aware of this issue. Maybe a couple years ago, they weren't as attuned to the kind of corporate welfare and corruption that goes on here. Now they're very aware of it. I had an exchange with the National Political Director of the Chamber of Commerce on Twitter last week, and the response I got in support of my position was incredible, and the backlash he got for pushing corporate welfare was also incredible. So people are fed up with it.
And the key is, most people don't know what the Ex-Im Bank is. Frankly, I didn't know what the Ex-Im Bank was before I got here to Congress. So, and I was a well-informed voter who was a member of the state legislature, who was passionate about politics my entire life. I wasn't fully aware what the Ex-Im Bank was. So most individuals don't really know the bank, but they do understand cronyism. They do understand special interest groups. They do understand that that's what they're tired of as Americans. And this is across the board. Republicans and Democrats are tired of special favors for special friends. And what concerns me, so yes, I am concerned about Boehner getting together with the Democrats. But the second half of your question is what concerns me the most. The Democrats continue to say that they're the party of the small business. They continue to say that they're the party of the people, but yet they continuously ask for a bigger government that actually harms small business. They continue to ask for a bigger government that actually makes it less likely that individuals are going to prosper. And their policies are destructive to the American system of capitalism and all these other things. So it's interesting to me that, Elizabeth Warren, who's supposed to be the champion of the little people, she's the biggest defender of a crony capitalism system. And it's the only chance that she actually has to stop some of the cronyism that she seems to be attacking all the time. So you have every single Democrat on board saying that they want to pass this, that they're going to do everything they can to make sure that just the privileged few that give money to their campaigns get a benefit that not every American is receiving. And by the way, I just want to say, on a totally separate subject, thank you for the pizza. I was kind of tired of having the same menu every single week. So for the reporters, we're going to have different things, so you can all feel welcome to come as often as you want.
And for the record, your office did lead the charge on that, and
Yes.
we appreciate it. We want to make everyone happy here. Congresswoman Loomis, and then we'll open it up to the floor.
Your question about whether we're concerned that Speaker Boehner might team up with Democrats and bring this to the floor. I'm actually more concerned about that kind of thing happening in the Senate. I believe that Speaker Boehner will respect regular order on this issue and will allow the Ex-Im Bank to expire if that is what the House Financial Services Committee decides to do. I doubt, quite frankly, that the Senate will be as respectful of regular order.
All right, thank you. We will open it up to the floor. And again, I just ask if you would please state your name and your affiliation. We'll go to the gentleman first here in the back. And we have a microphone that she'll bring around for you.
Hi, Jonathan Weiss from the New York Times. I just want to hopefully get a canvas of all of you on where you are on Trade Promotion Authority, which is going to probably come to the House right after your break.
I'll start out. I'm currently leaning no. I want to see what the final product includes. But Trade Promotion Authority is about process. It's not about the trade agreement itself. So there are people within the Republican conference who could vote no on TPA, but also vote yes on trade agreements.
So the vocal majority of my constituents are against it, and I'm leaning no. I have gone to the classified briefing room, and I've sat down with the documents. Actually, Mr. Hulskamp and I sat down in the same session and went through those. It's very hard to interpret for us when we're not allowed to take notes. It references other agreements that we obviously don't have with us when we're in their meeting, and it would take a lot of effort for one congressman to understand what's in that room and what's in that document without being well versed in trade agreements. And I would like to hear more informed positions on the TPP, and that requires sharing knowledge of the TPP with more people, I think, before I fast track it.
As my colleague noted, we sat in a room and read, I think I finished it. I don't know if my colleague got to it. He's MIT grad. It took a little bit longer, so they do math stuff. Just kidding. So, but if you look, TPA is process, but clearly without TPA, you won't have TPP, and you won't have an agreement with the EU, in my opinion. But the language is currently being negotiated and would have to be finalized after TPA. I really like the language in TPP. I think it promotes markets. It promotes less government. And actually, if you look at, we just had the issue of the Ex-Im Bank. I think the Ex-Im Bank is entirely inconsistent with TPP. and I don't think it necessarily would be not permitted, but potentially that might be an issue. That if you're going to trade with Australia, you probably couldn't use a TPP to make, or excuse me, the XM to make that happen, which is interesting. But the TPA, as it stands now, I think there are much more safeguards in there, that many more safeguards in there than in the past. I certainly represent an area that is willing and able to trade around the world. We're in agriculture in my district. Other industries are hit differently, but the safeguards there, the protections are there, are much more than any TPA, in my understanding, since they began with FDR. So I am a yes, and look forward to moving quickly on a TPP and in the future.
I am leaning no on TPA. I think I'm leaning yes on TPP, but obviously Tim is correct. Well, it's somewhat correct about we can't have one without the other, although we could put the TPP on the floor under just regular order. But the main concern with the TPA is the process, and there are ways that we can improve the process. There's a bunch of members of the Freedom Caucus that are going to introduce an amendment that I think would improve the process and would give us a better ability to control and to have a voice in what really happens during fast track. Our main concern is that what it would require to go through a really lengthy process that to deny any kind of trade agreement, to turn down any kind of trade agreement. You have to first go through the Ways and Means Committee. Then you have to go through the Rules Committee. Then you have to go through the House. Then you have to go through the Finance Committee. Then you have to go through the Senate with 60 votes. Well, that's regular order, but at the same time, if the Ways and Means Committee decides that they like the trade agreement, I don't get a voice. I'm not on the Ways and Means Committee. I don't get to have that vote on the floor. If we can somehow bring that vote to the floor where I can have a yes or no vote, and every member of the House would have a yes or no vote on the trade agreement, even though most of us are predisposed to voting for trade agreements, I think we would feel a lot better about TPA. So that's what we're advocating for as conservatives, is give us this opportunity to vote it up or down, to have the debate on the floor, and obviously it can go through the different committees, but give us an opportunity to do this, and I think there will be a vote for it. Most of us could vote for the TPA.
Trade's opportunity to sell your products in broader markets. That's a good thing. I think all up here are for that. We, as has been said already, we have concerns with the process. I have told the Whip's office I lean no. The other new thing that's being talked about, and I think being done in the Senate, is they're adding trade adjustment to the actual trade promotion authority. That is a problem as well. We're hearing rumors that we may have a rule that will split them and then put them back together when it comes to the House. I think that is a problem. For that process, which has been attempted here before, I use the ESPN term trickeration. I just don't like that. Come straight forward with the bills, and let's do it that way. So I think, as has been said by a lot of people, the process is a concern for us, and that's why many of us have leaned no.
I whipped undecided, and for the reasons described here earlier. I, however, conceptually would like to support TPA. So I'm hopeful that some of these details can be worked out. The reason that TPA followed by TPP would be so valuable to our country is that about 95% of the world's consumers are not in the United States. So think about the markets that opens up for American products. And because of our tremendous ingenuity as Americans, we are capable of marketing products worldwide that are second to none in terms of the future, in terms of technology, in terms of quality agricultural products. The opportunities are stupendous if we would open up these markets to American businesses. So I hope I can vote for it. But for the reasons described by my colleagues, I whipped undecided.
I am for free trade and normally would be for a trade agreement, but in this case I'm leaning no, and one of the reasons is pointed out to one of the whip team is that if a constituent came up to me in my district and asked what has more authority, the Constitution or TPA, how would you answer that? And he said, obviously the Constitution. And I said, well, here's the follow-up. If the president won't abide by the Constitution, what gives you any confidence that he will abide by TPA? And his response were the safeguards. Well, when it takes 60 votes in the Senate, I don't think that we have any safeguards. The other thing that I find troubling about this is that the president promotes this in the context of creating jobs for American workers, yet he vetoed the construction of the Keystone XL pipeline when his own White House estimated that tens of thousands of jobs would be created by completion of the pipeline. There are other activities that this administration is engaged in, particularly with the new ozone rules, the water rules, the greenhouse gas emissions that are killing jobs in the United States. And I have a real problem with a president promoting trade as a means of creating jobs when they're taking actions that have a devastating impact on the economy. There are 93 million able-bodied Americans out of the workforce. One other thing, in reading the bill, there's a section in there that deals with cybersecurity and basically says this, and I'm paraphrasing, that nations should avoid committing cyber crimes. Okay? I don't think avoid is a strong enough word. As a matter of fact, I think we ought to require that any nation that engages in breaches of cybersecurity in the United States, whether it's a government agency or the private sector, would be excluded from a trade agreement, and we need to do that now before we start negotiating any kind of trade agreement with China.
Congressman Bratt, would you like to weigh in?
Yeah, I'll weigh in. Thank you very much. Trade is hugely important. I've taught economics for the past 18 years. When I started teaching economics 20 years ago, the Chinese and Indians made roughly $700 a year per capita. Their move toward free markets are good, have lifted 2.5 billion people out of poverty. That's what we want to achieve. Everyone up on this panel cares about every single person on this planet. Sometimes that gets lost in the conversation up here in the kind of soundbite world we all live in. So that's the first premise. The latest in economics, trade and tariff reduction, we've achieved a lot over the past 50 years, right? Since Bretton Woods and the end of World War II, tariffs are down from 45% to 5% on average. So we've made huge gains. So what's at stake in this trade agreement are a lot of non-economic, non-pure economic variables, right? Like labor standards, environment standards, regulatory standards. President Obama calls this a very progressive trade deal, right? And so that makes my ears perk up. What's that mean, right? And so we just got done going through a major trust issue on President Obama's unconstitutional end run when it comes to amnesty and the DACA issue. In my view, he did an end run around the Constitution. That's a high-level principle that matters when it comes to trust. So now we're going to enter into a trade agreement where he can still, there are living sections to this trade agreement. And as Raul Labrador just explained, there are about 5 hurdles. If we want to say no to this progress, it's got to go through the House, the Senate Finance, Rules, and our Money Committee. And so that's a high hurdle if President Obama puts anything in there that we don't like. And we're promised an up or down vote at the end, but as Raul said, that may not end up happening. So the latest in economics, most economists, Doug North won a Nobel Prize for this 20 years ago, institutions matter and in economics, right? So you can have free markets, but institutions matter crucially, and that's what we're talking about here is a relationship between the executive branch of government and the Congress, major institutions that matter for the broader free market context. Free markets don't exist in a vacuum. They exist in that totality. And so I'm leaning heavy no because I don't think we're taking these institutional concerns into account, and it appears that the U.S. gets rolled a lot. We are still the superpower. In my view, trade should be part one tool in our toolkit that works in alignment with our national security concerns, with our military superiority, with our educational system. All of this are tools we have. The rest of the world, the Middle East, China, we have tensions. And we should use all of these tools, not just when the business community needs a narrow band approved. All of this should be a bundle that helps us achieve our U.S. interests. Thank you. Sorry I went on so long.
Thank you. All right, we'll come here and then we'll come up to the front. Kelsey.
Hi, I'm Kelsey Harkness with the Daily Signal. I want to switch gears to the USA Freedom Act. If the Senate rejects the bill, would you be willing to consider a compromise? And if not, how would you address concerns that cell phone companies and the likes aren't ready for the changes set forth in the bill, potentially leaving America more vulnerable to terrorism?
Yeah, well, if by compromise you mean making the bill worse, reducing privacy protections, then no, I would not support that, and I suspect most of my colleagues would not support that. The USA Freedom Act, as currently drawn up, is about as far as a lot of them will go. We still had a lot of Republican no votes and a lot of Democratic no votes. I think if they water it down anymore, it'll be in real trouble. There's also no support for a clean reauthorization. I think it's a waste of time for Mitch McConnell to really even talk about it because it has no chance here in the House, and I believe it has no chance in the Senate. We have a Constitution. We should follow the Constitution, follow the Fourth Amendment, and if we're going to work on surveillance reform, we can look back at the original USA Freedom Act from 2013 or the Massey-Lofgren Amendment. And I'll turn it over to Thomas Massey.
I suspect that the Freedom Act is the pre-negotiated end settlement that the intelligence community wants. And so I believe this is just posturing right now and tactful negotiation to say that we're going to do a clean reauthorization, to hold that over the heads of certain senators to get them to comply and then finally agree with the reserve price, which is the Freedom Act that passed the House. And I didn't vote for the Freedom Act. I think it's a bad bill. But I think that's what the Senate Majority Leader actually eventually wants.
Yeah, I just want to echo what Representative Massey said. I believe Mitch McConnell supports the USA Freedom Act. I think this is posturing. I don't believe these senators who object to it really object to it. They accept the Freedom Act, and they're trying to buy some leverage to make it even worse. We need to stand strong and tell them that it gets no worse. And in fact, if they want to get something passed, I think they're going to need to make it actually stronger in terms of privacy protections.
I voted against the Freedom Act, not because it was too strong. It wasn't strong enough. It didn't protect the Fourth Amendment like it should. In fact, your question leads to one of the reasons that I voted against the Freedom Act. The phone companies are not ready, according to some people, for this. I don't know that I want the phone companies to be gathering my data either. So I don't want the government to do it. I don't want the phone companies to do it. I don't want anybody to do it unless somebody has issued a warrant. And that's what the Fourth Amendment requires. There's a process to go through that. And I think what we're doing for the first time, remember the Second Circuit said that nothing in the Patriot Act allowed the bulk data collection that the government had been engaged in for the last few years. Now we're telling as federal government, as a Congress, we're saying that it's okay to allow that bulk data collection as long as phone companies are doing the bulk data collection and not the NSA. Well, no, that's not right. We didn't allow it under the Patriot Act. In fact, during testimony or private conversations, I still haven't heard which one, the members of Congress at the time were told that there would be no bulk data collection under the Patriot Act. And yet the NSA decided to engage in bulk data collection. And now we're saying, as members of Congress, when we pass the Freedom Act, that it's okay to have bulk data collection in some instances, and in all instances if the phone companies engage in the bulk data collection and we just have an arm's length deal with them. Well, no, I'm opposed to that. We should allow the 215 program to end. In fact, I think we should allow the Patriot Act to expire completely. But we need to go back to the rule of law and to our Constitution. And I don't understand. Conservatives love to talk about First Amendment, Second Amendment. Well, let's remember that there's a Third Amendment, there's a Fourth Amendment, there's a Fifth Amendment, there's all these other amendments. If we truly believe in the Constitution and we truly believe in the Bill of Rights, then let's stand up for all of them, not just for a few that make us popular at town hall meetings.
I'll just say one thing sort of inside baseball process argument. We were told here in the House we couldn't have Mr. Massey's amendment made in order on the floor. We actually offered it in committee. Mr. Poe offered it, and we were told, no, this can't pass. It'll ruin the deal. We have this negotiated USA Freedom Act. That's the only thing we can do. So we couldn't have an amendment made in order on the floor, even though that same amendment got 293 votes last Congress. Well, now we're in the midst of an experiment. We're going to find out, is that true or not? Because in the Senate, we're going to know within the next 24 hours whether we're going to get the USA Freedom Act back here or some short-term reauthorization of the Patriot Act. And we'll see. I don't think, as Mr. Massey said, the Patriot Act, just straight-up reauthorization, I don't think that can pass. So it's kind of interesting how this process is playing out when we were told one thing, and we're going to see if that actually plays out.
And I would encourage reporters to stop repeating the line that it ends bulk collection, that the Freedom Act ends bulk collection. It does not end bulk collection. The intelligence community likes to use the term bulk as a term of art, where they mean bulk, where they use the word bulk to mean everything. So if it's anything short of everything, they say it's not bulk. Well, nobody at home thinks that way. Bulk collection includes large collection short of everything in common speak. So we should stop using that kind of language. And actually, if you look at the Freedom Act that passed last Congress, which was also a watered-down version of the Freedom Act, very similar to the current Freedom Act, the Second Circuit mentions that version of the Freedom Act in their opinion, and the Second Circuit actually says Congress passed a watered-down version of the Freedom Act that did not end bulk collection. It's in the Second Circuit opinion. That Freedom Act is very similar to the current Freedom Act, and the Second Circuit has asserted that that version did not end bulk collection, just as this version doesn't end bulk collection.
I also just want to encourage a reporter who's interested in doing the job to ask somebody, maybe chairman of the Select Intelligence Committee, maybe somebody at the NSA, after the Freedom Act passes, do they still believe that they have the authority to collect metadata on email and websites that you visited, if we're going to talk about bulk collection? Because they assert now, and if you go back and look, they said that they ran a program where they did collect that information. They just found it to be unwieldy. But they still assert they have that authority. Ask them, will they have that authority after the Freedom Act passes?
John.
Thank you, Genevieve. I wanted to ask the members of Congress, beginning with Congressman Labrador, there's a major dispute about the trade agreements that's come up and been at the White House. I asked Press Secretary Josh Earnest if the still unseen TPP and TTIP measures contain references to immigration that could be construed as comprehensive immigration. And he said, well, the President certainly favors that. That is not within the treaty. Congressman Paul Ryan said this is an urban legend to say that this is somehow backdoor for comprehensive immigration. Chairman Goodlatte sent out a letter saying that he's been assured nothing is there by USTR Froman. My question is this: who's right on this issue? Senator Sessions said it does indeed contain parts of the comprehensive immigration bill. So you have a split between the administration and some Republican members and other Republican members on this issue. Who's right?
Thank you. And the answer is that I don't know. I have asked my staff to look at every single piece of literature, to look at whatever they can on the deal, to get as much information as possible. We have not found any evidence yet that there is something in the deal dealing with immigration. I do know it probably mentions, and I haven't seen this exactly, but it probably does mention some L visas. You know, L visas are currently allowed under our current law. But we are trying to get to the bottom of this, because I keep getting calls from my constituents about it, and we keep telling them that we haven't found any evidence of that. You know, maybe I need to I have not contacted Senator Sessions. Maybe he needs to give me the information that he has. But I have not seen anything on that. But we are concerned about it because we keep hearing about it in the district.
I have read the proposed TPP. Again, this is a negotiated agreement or under negotiation. There are sections that apparently have been finalized as far as one can without the final TPA, if and when that does pass. And I have looked through hundreds and hundreds of pages and directly from USTR, and there is nothing in there on immigration other than the reference to travel visas for business-only purposes. If you want to come to this country and visit in terms of a company or investment you might own, which is it's not what we're talking about here. But as far as the comprehensive immigration thing, there is absolutely no language provided to me that by USTR as under that agreement, but recognize as well that there are a number of proposals in there. Immigration is not one of them. U.S. has made a number of proposals that have yet to be accepted, and vice versa. It's an agreement under negotiation. And so there are provisions in where our country has said we want to do this, and every other nation says, well, we like that in part. It's an ongoing negotiation. But this idea from folks that there's somehow a comprehensive immigration offer on the table, there is nothing in the proposed ongoing language, and I'm not certain where that comes from. I don't know if these folks that have read this or not, but the language as provided USTR has none of that.
And there is a concern, just to piggyback on what Congressman Huelskamp is saying. Some people believe that the L visas and the visitor visas are a pathway to comprehensive reform. Because those visas have been abused. If you look at the business visitor visa, it has been abused. If you look at the L visas, they have been abused. But that has nothing to do with the trade agreement. That has something to do with maybe we need reform on the guest worker visas and L visas. But I just don't see any evidence of there being some kind of agreement in there that would lead to comprehensive reform.
Congressman Bratt.
Yep, thank you. I hate to say this, but the answer to your couple questions, part of it depends on what the definition of is. We're in a catch-22 here in answering this question because we went into a security bunker to read a secret trade agreement, and so we can't tell you. But you used the word, someone has assured you that nothing is in the document related to immigration. Is, so that's in the present tense, but that doesn't mean that there can't be tomorrow. So the word is in the present. So it can be put in tomorrow or at a future date. Senator Sessions has referred to aspects of this living document. And then when it comes to urban legends, I've been an economist for 18 years, and so doing an end run around the Constitution for me would have been considered an urban legend, right? And so if we're going to talk about urban legends, President Obama's unconstitutional end run around the Constitution on amnesty, boy, that breaks the trust level up big time. So urban legends, I would have found that unbelievable a year ago, and now it's not unbelievable. So that's the context we find ourselves in, and our side said we would fight tooth and nail on that up till February 27, and I don't think we did that.
Hi, switching gears a little bit, I'm Tamar Hallerman from C-Cube Roll Call. We're starting to hear rumblings around the Hill about the possibility of another Ryan Murray-esque budget deal later in the year. Republican leaders have indicated that they might be open to it if any increased discretionary spending is offset by mandatory cuts. Where do you guys stand on that prospect right now?
I hope whatever deal they're thinking about coming up with, they're mandatory cuts today and not in the future. You know, what happens in Washington is that we make promises of cuts in the future, and we use those as offsets for increases in spending today. So if you have a one-for-one deal, mandatory versus discretionary, I'd probably be okay with that, but that has to be cuts today. What you're going to see our leadership do is they're going to do a trickeration, do something that allows us to claim that we are cutting spending in the future when the reality is that we're never going to get to that spending cut in the future. But if they can find something that cuts today, I think that was the whole purpose of sequestration, is to get to have mandatory reform, which we need to have, and get us to a point where we can balance our budget. And I think I'm all for balancing the budget and trying to figure out how we can do that. But what you will see is you will see a bunch of promises of cuts in the future, just like the SGR. If you remember SGR, when it first started, that was a promise of cuts in the future. And as soon as those cuts were about to happen, we started promising physicians that we were never going to do those SGR cuts. And then finally, this year, we just did a deal that was hailed by everybody here in Washington, D.C. as a great deal for doctors and patients when no one had to really lift a finger. All we did is we added more money to the deficit.
Raul's exactly right. We've always been in favor of real savings, real changes to mandatory spending in the present. That makes sense. Let's do that, and we can increase discretionary spending. But I didn't vote for Ryan Murray 1. If it's comparable kind of plan, I don't plan to vote for something that doesn't do what we just described, which is what the sequestration was, as Raul said, all about. You do real savings in the long-term spending, but you get some real savings with it now, then you can increase discretionary. Short of that, I don't think it makes sense.
Yeah, we don't want to replace sequestration with trickeration. There's no reason we can't have
the word of the day.
There's no reason we can't have discretionary cuts now and mandatory cuts now and in the future. We have an $18 trillion debt. We have to get our house in order. And there's an effort every time we run into some kind of budget situation, there's an effort to increase spending. And there are accounting gimmicks put in place where spending goes up now and there's a promise of cuts in the distant future. And we're not going to stand for that.
I think the press can be hugely helpful on this budget context. In the budget committee this year, we tried very hard to stay within the caps. And in the short run, sequestration is kind of the representative of pain that we're talking about. But actually, sequestration is a small amount of pain in comparison with the big picture. The debt's $18 trillion. You scroll to the bottom of the debt clock. The unfunded liabilities are $127 trillion. Those 4 programs plus interest will take up all federal revenues by 2032. So this year in the Budget Committee, we had some mild drama having to do with OCO and the defense budget, right? A $20 billion will fine, pay for, or not. That was the issue. By 2032, if those 4 programs take up all federal revenues, how much does that leave for defense? 0. So if the press thinks sequestration is a story, there's a much bigger story to be had that frames everything going forward.
And I want to comment on your Ryan Murray question as well. My big objection to Ryan Murray was that it treated Western states like colonies. Once again, taking money from the states because Washington thinks it can spend it better and smarter. So as Washington continues to treat the West like a colony, and those states have different legal footing than eastern states that are primarily private land states, we create a difference in the way Western states are perceived and treated, turning Western states into supplicants to the federal government, even though it was the states that created the federal government in the first place.
Hi, I'm Christina Peterson with the Wall Street Journal. For the handful of people who are still wavering on TPA, there's an effort in the Senate to attach an EXIM reauthorization to TPA. How would that affect your vote?
It sure makes it an easy decision. I would solidly vote no.
Yeah, that would be a solid no for me as well.
All right, let's go.
It goes without saying.
Melissa here, and then we're going to come back here and up here. Go ahead.
Hi, I'm Melissa Quinn from the Daily Signal. I'm just piggybacking off of that. What would your plan be if TPA was sent back to the House with EXIM reauthorization included?
To vote no.
All right, very back here.
To make sure I was on the floor of the House when they try to voice vote it.
Hi there, J.C. Derrick with World Magazine. I just wondered if any of you were involved in the meeting yesterday with Scott Walker and your impressions, and in particular, if you have any concerns or something you'd like to see him address as someone who you may not already know.
We had a Republican conference meeting when he was there speaking, and so I think most of us missed the meeting with Scott Walker. Did anybody? Oh, yesterday?
Yeah, I was there. He did a great job.
I've met with him before. He's very passionate advocate for his positions. I think we have a great field of candidates. I think it's fantastic how many candidates we have. I love how the media is saying that it's bad that we have so many candidates, and I'm trying to figure out how it is so bad that we have all these great candidates and the Democrats, their best candidate is Hillary Clinton. You know, it goes from the past, who has more baggage than a freight train. So it's just driving me crazy to see how bad it is for us to have so many good candidates. I'm supporting Rand Paul myself. I think he's the one who can bring more people to the party, who can bring new people, new voices, new ideas. I think he has the opportunity to be a transformational leader like Ronald Reagan was, that brought a whole group of people to the party. But I would be excited about the vast majority of the candidates that are running, including Scott Walker if he were the nominee. So I'm super excited and about our prospects, and I'm glad that Hillary is running. I thought that she was not going to run because of all her baggage. I thought that there was no way that the Democratic Party would allow her. And that she would allow herself to be put in a position where all those things have to be brought up again and again and again and again. So I hope you guys in the media ask her the tough questions, because you don't flinch from asking Republicans tough questions, but you seem to flinch a little bit from asking Hillary Clinton tough questions. She has a horrible record. She has a horrible record as a senator. She has a horrible record as the Secretary of State. She has a horrible record in defending her husband and all the things that he did as a man, who he had deplorable issues in his life, and she defended him. And you need to go after her, and you need to go after Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton has been a con man his entire life. Now we're finding out all these things that we know about the Clinton Foundation, how they have enriched themselves through the Clinton Foundation, and nobody seems to be concerned about those things. So, yeah, I have pretty strong feelings about it, and I feel pretty good about our chances.
My chief of staff reminded me, you talk about how great the field is. I agree with Raul. The field is tremendous on our side, but by comparison, I think it was the 96, I can't remember what year exactly, but we had a guy, Maury Taylor, spent a bunch of his own money, ran for president. 96, and I think he finished 8th place. Look at this field and look today who's in 8th place. It's someone like Bobby Jindal, successful governor, great candidate. That shows you the quality of the field on the Republican side. So I'm excited about all of them. Scott Walker did a great I mean, he's a great guy. I'm sure he did a great job. I stopped over and said hello, but had another meeting. But Raul's point about the quality of the Republican field, I think, can't be stated enough.
Good.
Yeah, James Arkin with Real Clear Politics. I have another 2016 question for you. In the past couple of weeks, there's been a lot of talk about decisions on going into the Iraq War and how candidates would have made that decision, you know, if they knew what they know now back then. And I'm wondering more broadly if there's any concern that because Jeb Bush is a candidate in this election and there's going to be some questions about his brother's time as president, if that might bring the conversation with the other candidates and with the entire field back to his presidency and to the last decade instead of looking forward and trying to look to the future.
Bush or anybody else, they have to have a forward-looking vision for America. I think Jeb Bush will have a little bit more difficult time than anybody else, but I think Jeb Bush is as welcome in the race as anybody else. I think he's going to have to answer probably some questions that other candidates don't need to answer, and he's going to have a more difficult time answering some of those questions because you're not just attacking another politician. He's attacking his brother. He would have to attack some of the decisions of his brother. It's going to be difficult for him, and I frankly feel for him, and because it would be difficult. I thought about that a lot. If I had a brother who was president and I was running for president, it's more personal when you're answering those questions than for me. I'm just answering questions about George W. Bush, what mistakes he made in the past or things he did well in the past. I'm not as personally invested in those things. So, but I don't think it's going to be an issue for us. It might be an issue for Jeb Bush, but not for the other candidates.
I'll just say the reciprocal question for you guys is, would Hillary vote for Obamacare knowing what she knows now?
And I think Hillary Clinton is the only candidate in the race who voted for the Iraq War. So the question should be posed to her. And, we've got a great field. I'm also supporting Rand Paul. But we have a great field. And I would take most of our candidates over Hillary Clinton. Maybe not all, but most.
All right, final question back
and
here. And
interesting, I'm glad Justin said what he said. She also had the same intelligence that George W. Bush had. So she's the only one who voted for it and the only one who looked at the same data points that George W. Bush had. And yet she's getting a pass on that.
Hey, Dan Neuhauser with National Journal. The first 6 weeks of this Congress were pretty contentious, and most of y'all and almost everybody else was pretty unhappy with what legislation was moving or not moving on the floor. Looking back at the last couple of weeks, has that changed at all? Or just big picture, are you more pleased with how things have gone? Certainly more legislation has passed.
I still have a concern with the process, and that was my frustration. Last Congress, that's frankly why I didn't vote for the Speaker, and the process is still broken. Yeah, we can pass a lot of bills on suspension. We can bring bills under closed rules and pass them, but all 435 members here are still not getting a real chance to affect the product, and that was painfully obvious in the Freedom Act.
I don't think the process has improved. There are just more bad pieces of legislation passing through Congress. Therefore, the Republican side is getting Democratic votes on those pieces of legislation. But the process hasn't improved. We offered amendments to the Freedom Act. Those amendments were not allowed to be brought up for a vote, and that's an issue that is critically important to the American people. So there's still a broken process, and I think a lot of Republicans are frustrated. It's not just conservatives. We hear it from all of our colleagues.
All I can tell you is that the Republican Party is doing a great job of improving Obama's approval rating. So tell me if that's a good thing.
Members, thank you all very much. Thank you all very much, and we'll be sending out a date shortly for the June Conversations with Conservatives.